So I just saw the Backrooms by Kane, and I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts on it. One of the things I picked up on was the family of the researcher was uh, they're all sitting around watching the Never-Ending Story on the TV. If you remember the Never-Ending Story, the antagonist is the Nothing, and the Nothing is it's an entity in itself, and it's basically devouring fantasy land, and it's the world of fantasy, and it's feeding off of people's lack of belief, or they're giving up on believing in fantasy. And I think um, if you remember the end of the movie, the researcher was talking about how the back rooms are growing, that there are new ports opening up all over the place that they're finding, and they aren't really sure what it is. And so I think, like, in a way, it's feeding off of the collapse of consumerism in American culture, or just in culture in general. Um, these, so it basically is feeding off of people's submission to just being seen as having value because you can shop, you can buy stuff. I'm not saying it's anti-capitalist or anything like that. It's just that it's feeding off of the doldrums of daily life, and it seems to be attached to the retail space or office spaces. And that's, if you remember in the beginning when the protagonist was having a therapy session, and they were role playing together, the protagonist basically started out, he has like this sheen of everything is fine, and just like as long as you don't make waves, you're gonna be fine. Because once the therapist starts leaning into him, and he starts losing his cool, it's like he's there's this huge storm going on inside of him that he's like suppressing, and he's letting off steam by blaming other people, which is what the therapist concluded about him. And but that allows him to keep this steady existence of everything's fine. Like, that's what the fantasy is in this, is that everything's fine and normal when it isn't. And I think, like, what a lot of liminal spaces and backroom spaces are pointing to is like that we leave behind these structures of things, like all the goods are gone, but the structures that were used to display those goods are still there. So there's spaces that look like this is supposed to be something, but its usefulness is passed on, and so now it's just kind of a relic, and it's not meant to exist this way. And I think the backgrounds are in a similar state, that that's not supposed to be happening, but it is anyway, and it's creating this weird space. So I think that people are like, you think of furniture shops and stuff like that, people are building their homes, they're just designing their lives and what their lives are going to look like aesthetically. That's usually where people buy like bedroom sets and all that stuff. And so that's where I think that's the type of consumerism I'm talking about. It's more of a memory. It's not like you shouldn't buy stuff because corporations are bad. It's like the more emotional connection with that part of life that we deal with. So I know there are other people making videos and stuff, and so I just wanted to basically make my point as to what it is. what the backrooms is. And if you look at Kane's one of Kane's videos, it's basically like it's like a PSA, basically, like for the company that is trying to monetize the backrooms, because it finds all this office space, all this retail space, and it's free, and they found it. All they have to do is map it and tell people where it is, and then they're going to be able to sell it as storage or as office spaces or whatever. And up to now, this point, they're still trying to figure out if it's stable enough to make those things happen, because one of the things in that video was they were also using it for transportation. So you could basically take one port, you could enter it at one place and exit at another place, and be like all the way across the country in a short span of time. And so they're trying to use it almost as a wormhole in that way, you know. So I think where we are in the story is before any of that starts to ramp up, like the corporate side of things. Because basically the researcher said he was pretty much just, they were manufacturing something, and then suddenly they found this place. And that's another point, whatever I'm going to make, is that it's, seems to be, whatever the backrooms is, it's responding to that sort of doldrums of existence, you know, like the boringness, the banality of daily life or whatever. And it seems like these people are in these mindsets where there's a storm going on inside, but they're just placid on the outside because they have to be. And that's a kind of giving up, in the same way that the never-ending story, The Nothing, people were giving up, but in that story they were giving up by not believing. In this story, they're basically giving up by not believing in themselves. And that's where I think things are going. So I disagree with Wendigoon's take that the entities are bacteria or something that are like an entity from another world or whatever that is just trying to make copies of us, because I think it's obvious that the backrooms itself is an entity, just like in SCP the flesh pit is an entity, and there are like houses and stuff that are entities unto themselves, like Nowhere House. I think I've watched that series through a few times, and I've listened to it, and I think it's a similar thing. It's like this place that is an entity unto itself, because we usually think of monsters as intruders, as beings with edges, and we don't really think of them as abstractions. And that's what this is tapping into, and it's just like nobody knows what to do with it. I'll close just by saying something. I've been watching a lot more horror lately. I watch a lot of horror anyway, but recently especially I've been watching a lot more. And what I think horror is to people, some people, is like it's horror movies are like those after school PSAs where they just show people doing normal stuff and having a happy family, and suddenly like a car comes flying through the bushes and everybody's dead. Or like there's a kid like swimming, and then suddenly you see him just floating there, and then the PSA is like, don't swim alone, always have a partner. And it's like, oh my word, like there's so many ways that we can die horribly. And so like I think like in a way horror movies are us being like, all right, if given this situation, how are you gonna survive it, you know? And that's sort of what we're looking for, is like, all right, we come out with a list of mistakes of things people shouldn't have done in that situation if they wanted to survive. Which I think, I don't know, that's probably not, I don't think that's profound. I just think it's funny that there's like this similarity between PSAs, this horrible, terrifying PSAs that traumatize you as a child, and people who are like into horror movies. It's like, wait a minute, but what if this happened or that happened? It's like, whatever. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. and I'm really looking forward to more. Thank you.